So, as you know, I was planning to have this video up, almost a week ago now. And then my computer died. Sigh. Well, anyway, it's back now and so am I. Welcome, welcome one and all, I am Coriander Stone, and today I'm bringing you my analysis of RWBY's Volume 3 opening, Time to Say Goodbye. There's something I quickly wanted to touch upon before diving right in, and that is RWBY's creator, Montaeum. Anyone who's reasonably familiar with the RWBY series knows that Montaeum passed away back in February of 2015, between volumes 2 and 3. After his death, certain things about where RWBY was going, especially after volume 3, were changed. Volume 3 was already in the works, and Monty actually did a good amount of work on the animation that later made it into the series. But after that, we don't know how much is his original creation and how much is what Rooster Teeth came up with after his death. In other words, while it's very possible that there are things in the early openings that hinted things to come in volumes 4, 5, 6, etc., I really hope we get that many volumes. Anyway, while such foreshadowing might very well have existed at the time, the way in which RWBY's had to change after Monty's death means that there are only certain pieces that we'll ever be able to understand, such as the things I talked about in my first 2 videos. Because the staff were no longer as sure of RWBY's final destination as they were at the beginning, the amount of foreshadowing in the latter 2 openings is far less than those belonging to the first 2 seasons. Starting with Volume 3's opening, the foreshadowing is a lot more season by season than with the overarching plotline, but that said, there's still a lot to analyze and we're about to dive right in. We open on this shot of Remnant's moon with a single one of RWBY's rose petals drifting by. Like the other 2 openings, this third opening opens on a shot of RWBY's rose petals, but it opens feeling far more ominous, foreshadowing the darkness of the season to come. The shot actually contrasts directly with the beginning of RWBY's first OP. Both shots open with the moon, and both fade into black, but RWBY's first opening immediately dispels the darkness with the shining light of RWBY's full whole moon, whereas here in Volume 3 we get the moon again, but this time shattered and cracked like it is in the series, and surrounded by a darkness that doesn't seem to break no matter how bright the moon is. We descend from the grim opening to an even more grim line of trees, insert puns here, and follow the rose petal downward, showing RWBY and her friends' descent into the darkness of the series. We started out with what can almost be called a bird's eye view, and then follow the rose petal downward. This mirrors RWBY's exposure to the truth behind her world, first as an outsider looking down on it, looking at the broad strokes that everyone can see, and then falling deep into the secrets of her world. At this point, we reach what is my favorite shot of the entire OP. RWBY's single rose petal drifting down toward a rose, deep within the mist of the forest, with Montaeum's name over it. I just love this image because of how much intrinsic meaning it holds for the series. For one thing, there's the obvious honor of Montaeum as RWBY's creator, the rose mirroring the rose one might put on a grave as an honor to the dead, the rose petal dropping down onto it representing RWBY, again pointing out that this is his creation, that RWBY is his character, and that the RWBY series as a whole will always be touched by him. The rose petal and rose also have distinct in-universe connotations as well. RWBY is, after all, a story with main characters all based around fairy tale figures. Most importantly, for our purposes, Blake Belladonna is loosely based off Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Additionally, her history and association with Adam place him loosely within the role of the Beast from Beauty and the Beast, since Adam was, in fact, the Beast's true name. Now, in the original fairy tale, the rose petals represent the Beast's humanity, and as each one falls, he becomes more and more bestial, with every fallen petal the hope of him becoming human again fading away. We also know that Adam has become more violent over the last several years, and that's ultimately what led Blake to abandon him and the White Fang. So following this to its logical conclusion, the falling rose petal foreshadows Adam's appearance in the story as a violent menace, and as a feast, if you will, and the falling petal represents that Blake's last hopes of saving him have fallen away. At the same time, the rose petal is always used as Ruby's symbol throughout both the openings and the entire series, and so that intrinsically ties Ruby into this mixture of relationship between Adam and Blake, showing that she and, by extension, Team Ruby will all get caught up in the backlash from what's to come and what Adam brings. But before the petal can hit the ground, the music swells up and the Grimm come charging out of nowhere, trampling it and leaving it as nothing. Again, this image has both in-universe and out-universe connotations. Out-universe, the image of a violent soulless creature charging across and destroying something pure and not yet ready to die, clearly represents the continued grief at the death of Monty by the staff at Rooster Teeth, and the feeling that he was taken too soon. In-universe, it also has several meanings. For one thing, if the rose and petal are meant to represent Blake and Adam and their conflict, Blake's attempts to save him, and Ruby being sucked into the fray, then the idea of it being trampled aside shows how little that matters. How the petty human or human faunus fighting is all blown away by the power and might of the Grimm, an overwhelming force beneath whose feet the little human squabbles can be trampled aside. It also shows that Adam is not the main antagonist here. The focus, which was initially on him, is easily and quickly shoved aside by the Grimm and therefore by their creator, Salem. Additionally, the image of Ruby's rose petal being so easily trampled aside by the rampaging Grimm goes to bring home what Ruby's really up against, how powerful her enemy is, and how insignificant she is by comparison. The angle of the camera shifts, and suddenly the Grimm are coming straight at the viewer, an unstoppable force bearing down on huntsman and civilian alike. The next few shots are character introductions, all framed within a spinning version of the stadium in which the Vital Festival takes place. The spinning and the mechanism for the spinning is focused on a lot, all of which serves to present the viewer with a whole lot of Wheel of Fate imagery, from the way that the characters are moved around from place to place by the wheel, to the way the wheel seems to affect everyone's perceptions. It's clear that everyone's caught within it, all, again, going back to the metaphor of the Wheel of Fate. In traditional mythology, the Wheel of Fate is used to represent a great change in circumstance, the high becoming low, the low becoming high, and the top falling to the bottom. Since Team Ruby and the other heroes have, at least until now, proved victorious in all things and generally undefeatable, their place is at the top of the wheel, and the wheel's appearance shows them coming crashing down to the bottom, an image that foreshadows the fall of Beacon at the end of the season. Now if we pull back a second, we see that we reached Fortune's wheel by falling into the eye of a Grimm, suggesting that the eye, or rather the one behind the eye, the one controlling the Grimm, is responsible for the change in Fortune's wheel, i.e. foreshadowing Salem. As for the character shots themselves, there are only two worth talking about. The first belongs to Team Juniper. While all of the other teams have sets of 2 and 2 with two characters looking one way and two the other in a generally heroic pose, Team Juniper's characters are all looking in one direction, with the exception of Kira, who not only is looking in a different direction, but also seems animated in a slightly different size and shape than the others, suggesting further her separation from her team and how her life is going in a very different direction from theirs. Or rather, is it going? The second is the image of the villains, Emerald, Cinder, and Mercury. Where all the other images were static except for the wheels shaking, Cinder calls the power of the dust in her clothing to rise around her, and we see the fire leap up. Her movement, where all the other characters are static, shows that she is the one with the most control over the situation, which makes sense as Salem's ally. Additionally, it also makes sense in the context of the episode, in which we learn about her goals to be feared and powerful. The fire Cinder unleashes leaps up to take us away from the wheel, and in doing so suggests that it is Cinder who is breaking what was Fate's wheel, rearranging fate to her own liking. Again, we transition through a Grimm's eye, cementing a connection between Cinder and the one controlling the Grimm. Next, we get some shots of Grimm overrunning Beacon Academy, which I would call less foreshadowing and more plain-out spoilers, as it essentially depicts the fall of Beacon at the end of the season. There are still some good images here though, especially the one of the heroic statue of the huntsman being surrounded by Grimm who race past it, as the huntsmen are unable to do anything to defend their school. Additionally, all of the Grimm swarming toward the tower and trying to reach it give us some idea of what the Grimm's goal is, that is, the destruction of Beacon's tower. We get a nice little image of Glinda and Ozpin standing presumably in the tower since they're bathed in the same green light and surrounded by Grimm. The thin wall protecting them shatters to reveal Ironwood's ships. As the glass shatters, we see Ozpin's face briefly reflected back in the broken glass, perhaps representing the breaking and end of this one of his many identities. And the fact that it is the presence of Ironwood's ships that ultimately breaks the glass protecting Ozpin and Beacon foreshadows the way in which Cinder uses the military and its might against Beacon's defenders. Blake encounters Adam in the same forest that he was in when she parted ways with him during the Black Trailer, signifying how she's still stuck in that moment and can't move forward. Adam's presence unleashes a tide of screen-shatteringly violent red, which fades away to reveal the Grimm, signifying how Adam lets the Grimm into Beacon Academy. Then we get our nice little action centerpiece and switch over to one-on-one fights with each of the four main girls taking on one of the antagonists, all paired up with the significant antagonist who they spar with during the show, with of course the exception once again of Weiss and Emerald, who are just sort of paired up because we're out of options. The main significance of these fights is that the girls seem once again trapped within the spinning walls of the Wheel of Fate, again representing how things have spiraled way out of their control and they're about to face a serious fall from the top of the wheel. The next few shots aren't particularly subtle as they show Weiss and Winter and a little bit of their relationship, Crow, Yang, and Ruby, and very little of their relationship except that they have one, and that Crow and Winter don't get along. Then an old picture of Team Stark floats past, distracting Crow and presumably reminding him why he puts up with Winter and, by extension, why he's involved in the whole damn mess. Once again we are presented with that gear imagery from the first two OPs. This time it comes through Crow's sight. Since we've already established, because of the first two openings, that gears are connected to Ozpin, this creates a connection between Crow and Ozpin, which makes sense considering Crow's decision at the end of the series to carry on Ozpin's work in his place until Ozpin returns. Of course, the gears deliver us to what else? The other symbol that pervades all the RWBY openings, the one I can't explain, that void thing that may be linked to Vaven or something, and we see all 8 of our main characters trapped within it, again within this Fortune's Wheel spinning motif of imagery. And I know that I am far from the first person in the RWBY fandom to point out that Pyrrha is the first to be blown out of the loop. Finally, everyone has scattered to the winds as they are at the end of Volume 3, and RWBY looks with horror on the destruction of her world. Next, we end up with the 4 members of Team RWBY all sitting in a huddle in the middle of a spotlight. They're all looking different directions, symbolizing how they've been separated at the end of the volume. Blake, Yang, and Weiss all look downcast and away, having given up at the end of the season, whereas RWBY is the only one looking up, since she's the only one to keep going after Pyrrha's death in the fall of Beacon. After we get a look at how downcast everyone is, we get one final look at RWBY's hopeful face as she faces forward and into the next volume before the screen goes black, leaving us with an ominous feeling, but also one of hope. A nice little combination for a season so full of both. All in all, When It Falls is a very dark OP, even without the darkness of the lyrics, which I didn't even have a chance to touch upon. And combined together, they make it crystal clear that things in the RWBY universe are going downhill fast. Speaking of fast, I'm hoping to have the next installation, that is to say the final installation of this series, up rather quickly, but unfortunately I'm going to be traveling, so no guarantees. Now then, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this sort of thing. Let me know about that down in the comments, and feel free to let me know about anything you think I missed. This is Coriander Stone, and I thank you for watching.